Baz Luhrmann is nowhere near South Korea at the moment, but you could be forgiven for thinking that he had a hand in the Winter Olympics. A good part of it is playing out as a tribute to his 2001 movie, Moulin Rouge. Skaters from 4 different countries have revived at least a half-dozen songs from the film's soundtrack for their routines, most notably, the Canadians, who have now become the most rewarded ice dance team in history, with an assist from soundtrack cuts like the Ewan McGregor song, Come What May. This is the first year that the Olympics have allowed songs with lyrics to be part of the skating competition, and it's as if 17 years worth of bottled-up Moulin Rouge mania is being unleashed all at once. The director spoke with Variety about his fandom for the Olympians' Moulin fixation, along with his appreciation for what's being done with the upcoming Broadway adaptation of the film, which he's observing from only slightly less of a distance. Variety, with the Broadway stage musical version of Moulin Rouge opening this year, some might think the production had an endorsement or sponsorship deal with the Olympics. Was an arrangement made on the sly? Baz Luhrmann: I can tell you that when I woke up and the Moulin Rouge album was no. 13 on the iTunes chart, and I don't know if it had even been on the charts in 10 years, I was as surprised as everybody else. But hey, I'm happy to consider Moulin Rouge on ice the skating spectacular. I know how I'd cast it. The soundtrack album was a strong seller at the time, but it wasn't Thriller big. Hearing it used in the Olympics might lead you to believe that it was more ubiquitous than it was. I've got quite a few Moulin Rouge platinum records, CDs, on my wall. But I certainly don't have anything near what I'm sure Quincy Jones and Michael had on their walls. Moulin was very much driven in the early parts by the single that we did with Christina Aguilera and Pink, Lady Marmalade, when they were new on the scene. And the soundtrack has had a life. But the film itself, there's a greater love, appreciation and openness now to the musical form, thank God. I went through such a war to convince people that maybe there was a way of mashing the musical door open again back then. As with all the work I did, there was a hugely divided critical response. The 2 critics for Time magazine, I think one called it the second best film of the year, and one called it the worst. Indeed, Richard Corliss did have it as his second best for 2001, while his comrade Richard Schickel had it as the year's 11th worst film, but the audiences find it, and they're very passionate and connected to it. Do you feel like what the Canadian skaters are doing goes beyond using the music as soundtrack to actually inhabiting the roles of Christian and Satine from the movie? With Scott Moyer and Tessa Virtue, the Canadian skaters, it feels like he is singing Ewan McGregor's lines to his partner. It feels like they're having a relationship. And it's kind of gone into another place by the Olympics allowing songs with lyrics. Because whether you consciously receive it or not, it's a narration inside your head. And like a ballet of Romeo and Juliet, you understand the story. I look at the routine that the 2 Canadian skaters did, and it's ballet on ice. ... The line between is it art or sport is completely irrelevant. It uplifts the soul. It exalts the spirit. You're sort of aware of how brilliantly clever the choreography is, but all of that just melds into one gesture, until you're just completely inside the emotion between those 2 characters. It's kind of another level. You're surprised by the level to which this is happening, but have you been getting a feeling over the years that the music is getting this kind of use, outside of the Olympics? Now we've moved into an era where there are many successful film musicals. And even currently, with Greatest Showman, it's just grown and grown. The thing about musicals is that once they start to work, they never go away. Sound of Music is being performed somewhere in the world every day. Moulin Rouge has had a different kind of life. Remember when Obama was running? He used Yes We Can, Because We Can, by Fatboy Slim, in his original campaign, in 2008. So the music has been used and been ongoing. And musicals, operas, by their very nature, they're heightened emotion. They're not meant to be realist. That's why you have very simple plots, but you can have extremely exalted emotions. And that really suits the narrative you need to play out on ice. Skating has a history of using opera or ballet scores, like Swan Lake and Carmen. It has to be as emotional as possible in 3 minutes. There's not a lot of time to waste in getting to that heightened state you are talking about. Exactly. I remember when I was a kid, Nadia Comaneci, do you remember her, the Romanian gymnast? She was doing her gymnastics to the theme from The Young and the Restless, and it became such a huge radio hit that they renamed it Nadia's theme. And that was the first time I can remember when sport popularized a piece of music that was relatively dormant. Like you said, Lady Marmalade was the hit, but it's other songs that the athletes have gravitated toward, the deep tracks. Are you surprised by which songs the athletes use? The Canadian routine